What's up, everybody? Time for episode 29 of Bleav in Queens. It's the Eric Campbell episode, if you will. Number 29.
Ooh.
I'm Joe Serralo. Yeah, make sure you tell Soup I said so, Rec. I'm Joe Serralo. As always, Tyler Ward at WardyNYM and the man himself, Anthony Recker, on the show. First episode we've done since the Mets have been eliminated, where we're not all, or at least Tyler, you and I don't need to be talked off a ledge. That's nice for a change.
Yeah.
Rec never really needed that, but Tyler and I were not doing well last episode. Well, actually, Tyler, you were really not doing well last episode.
No, like literally not doing well. That's correct.
Yeah, not even there.
No.
But it's time to look ahead. We're going to look a little bit at the offseason. Look, there's going to be plenty of offseason episodes, where we're going to deep dive free agency, positional needs, contract negotiations. We're going to hit the surface tonight because baseball is not over. Even though the Mets season is, baseball is still going on. We're going to look at the four divisional series, one of which is still going on. We'll look a little bit at the upcoming LCS series. But first, I do want to remind everyone that this episode, just like the first 28 episodes of Bleav in Queens, is brought to you by our proud sponsors and pals over at BetOnline. Head on over to betonline.ag and use the promo code BLEAV. That's BLEAV for your one-time, first-time, 100% welcome bonus. Any deposit between $50 and $1,000, BetOnline will match in full 100%. So you guys can bet on some postseason baseball. The NBA tips off tomorrow. Hockey has started. And of course, both college and professional football in full swing. So head on over to BetOnline and let the games begin. Gentlemen, let's dive in. Where do we want to start this one? Do we want to start looking at the Mets? Do we want to start looking at the playoff series? Tyler, I'll toss it up to you.
I'd say let's get playoffs out of the way because that's still currently going on now. And considering this is a Mets podcast, then we can spend the majority of the remainder of the show talking about said Mets.
Let's do it. All right. So we've got, you know what? I think this is the perfect place to start. The Atlanta Braves bounced with the same amount of wins as the New York Mets this year. Look at Rack.
One more loss than the Mets.
The Braves
got
bounced. Yeah, it's true. The Mets have the best winning percentage of any team in the NL East this year. That's something to hang. That's what the banner.
It's not over yet.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think if the Phillies win out, I still don't. Dr. Evil over there. I still don't think the Phillies would have a better winning percentage than the Mets, even if they won out. So that's what the 2022 banner will say. Braves Phillies first round matchup or second round matchup. What are your guys' thoughts? Rec, we'll start with you. What went wrong with Atlanta?
Everything. You know what's funny? We all talked about the advantages that the Mets had coming into this postseason. Starting pitching. Well, you get to this series with the Braves and Phillies, and you talk about the advantages between the Braves and the Phillies, and it was, I would say, bullpen. Their bullpen's going to be way better. I just saw a different Philly team. One that, I mean, just kept hitting. Offensively, they were monsters. And their pitching staff, their starters, I mean, they're doing what they're capable of, between Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola. And Aaron Nola looks disgusting so far in the playoffs. Wheeler's always really, I mean, I don't even want to talk about Brody Van Wagenen and his little charade as far as trying to push Zach Wheeler out the door and give him a smack on the way. Like, no, dude, this guy is really, really good at throwing a baseball. A lot went right for the Phillies. Realistically, look, sometimes, and it is the way it is, the Major League Baseball playoffs, they're never going to be about the best team winning all the time. That's why you haven't had a repeat champ since, 01? Or is that what it was?
The Yankees, yeah.
The Yankees. I guess it was actually 99, right? Was the last time there was a repeat champ?
Wasn't it 99 and 2000?
Maybe that was.
Right? They beat the Mets in 2000. They beat the Mets in 2000.
Yeah. Okay.
01,
yeah,
they
right.
lost to Arizona.
Yeah. Okay. So 2000 was the last year of the three-peat. Then, it's so hard because all it takes is one hot team to knock you out because they only have to win, in this case, 3 games out of 5, and in Philly's case, 3 games out of 4. And it looked like they were the better team. If you just watched that series, you would have left thinking, and none of the regular season at all, you would have left thinking, wow, this Philly team is dominated this Braves team. They are far and away the better squad. Like if you didn't know, everything that happened this year, and you didn't have any inkling coming into it, they were superior in every way. There was no part of the series where I thought, oh, okay, here we go. Here comes Atlanta. Even when they won game 2, I was thinking it didn't look like a dominant win. Philly looked like they still were in this thing, and it's going to Philly. They've got their guys on the mound. Like, I don't know. I never felt comfortable for Atlanta, and it was odd because going into the series, I felt very comfortable. They lost game 1, and it was like, okay, let's see. All right, they won game 2, but they still didn't look very good, and they never righted the ship. They never got going offensively. Offensively, they were putrid. Dansby Swanson, really bad series. Austin Riley, bad series.
Awful.
Darno looked decent at times. But even the rookies didn't look the same. Defensively, they made a few miscues. It was literally just that Philly was the better team in that 5-game set, and that's it. And that's what the playoffs come down to, especially in these early rounds when anything can happen. And we've been seeing it happen over and over and over again. I know we can get into the whole layoff thing, and we will later. But for now, I'm just going to end it on hot teams win in the playoffs. And you don't have to be hot for a long time coming into the playoffs. It just takes a couple of games, a few games, a week before the playoffs, whatever it is, to get yourself going. And Philly just ran with it. And it's really impressive to what they've done. And the mindset really that they've had after all the adversity they've overcome throughout the year. They've proven that they've got what it takes to come up big in the big spots.
And I would even argue, and Tyler, then we're going to toss it to you. I would argue Philly wasn't even hot going into the playoffs. They got hot in that St. Louis series.
Yeah.
Like they went into the playoffs. I thought they backed their way in. I mean, they got swept by Chicago way later in September than the Mets got swept by Chicago. They backed their way into the playoffs, and St. Louis blanked them for the first 8 innings, wasn't it, of game 1 in that wild card round? They got hot against St. Louis, and then they rode the momentum.
6 runs against that St. Louis bullpen, which was Helsley, and they have 10 guys that throw 1,000,000 miles an hour. Like, couldn't do it.
1 inning catapulted them. Tyler, what was your biggest takeaway from that Phillies Braves series besides pure happiness?
Yeah, seriously, the only time you'll see me happy for Phillies and their fans. I know that we got some watching live on YouTube right now. Some of our listeners, again, congratulations to all the Philly fans out there. I'm not rooting for you against the Padres, but I'm happy that you guys beat the Braves. Before I deep dive my thoughts on the series, I just want to give a quick shout out to, you guys for the well wishes over the past week plus since everything that was happening with me. Same thing to all of our live viewers here on YouTube and people on social media. I mean, the amount of comments and texts I got over the past week and a half has truly been overwhelming. So seriously, thank you guys all so much for that. I greatly appreciate it. I'm happy to be back here talking it up with you guys. But yeah, this Philly series, what stood out for me was, the Braves, it's crazy. They win this division, and what do? They don't take at all any advantage of it whatsoever. It was really bizarre to see from the jump. I mean, Max Fried didn't look good. Spencer Strider, when he was starting, I didn't have a good feeling that Strider was going to pitch well. He was unhittable through the first 2 innings, and then he got rocked in the third, and then he was out of the game. And one thing that stood out to me a lot from the Phillies side of things was there was one man that was a key acquisition for them at the trade deadline that wasn't pitching, and that's Brandon Marsh. That was a great pickup for them that they made from the LA Angels back that we saw earlier in the year. And Marsh became basically a 300 hitter throughout the regular season and the postseason for the Phillies. He brings them finally some sustainability, nothing crazy, but definitely a better center fielder than what they've had earlier in the year. And they just looked like 2 completely different teams throughout that entire series. The Phillies were mashing when they were supposed to, and then vice versa. The Braves, what has been their biggest bugaboo? What we would talk about as Mets fans is they're so swing and miss. Yes, they might lead the league or the NL, at least in home runs, but when they're not hitting home runs, they're not hitting much. And that was on full display in this series. Phillies pitching got the job done. They're more well-rounded all round, and it is really insane to see that we're not just only having the Phillies in the NLCS, but another team that didn't even crack 90 wins in the San Diego Padres.
It's wild. And we're going to get to that Padres-Dodgers series. But, when you mention the Phillies and the way that they've been playing and specifically the way that they've been pitching, even in the one game they lost to Atlanta, Zach Wheeler was dominant for 5 2/3. Then he hit Acuna, got Swanson to a full count, walked him, and everything kind of fell apart in that last third of the 5th inning. But he was dealing 5 2/3. I believe he was at like 57 pitches before he hit Acuna. And I think he went cold when Acuna went down and there was like a 10-minute delay. That's the only explanation, because he was absolutely, no pun intended, wheeling and dealing prior to hitting Acuna with 2 outs there in the 5th.
No pun intended.
Totally
Come on,
intended.
guys.
It's your turn to get It's your turn to get ragged for
that
one, Joe.
But when you look at Philly, especially in a 5-game set, even more so than a 7-game set, what's unique about this team, an 87, slightly above average team in the regular season, they're built for the playoffs with their pitching. They don't have one ace. They've got 2 aces, Wheeler and Nola. Suarez had a hell of a second half of the season. He's an up-and-coming guy. And you see what's possible for a team like Philly when they don't have to run Kyle Gibson and his 5+ ERA out there every 5th day, right? When they can afford not using Noah for 6 innings, but only using him one time through the lineup, letting him throw a little harder, air his stuff out, and then going to a bullpen game in Game 4. That's why the playoffs are a completely different animal, and why pitching really is so much more important than a team like the Braves just stacking, hitters out there who will swing for the fences, 27 times or more a game. Because when you have a team like Philly with those aces, Wheeler, Nola, Suarez, all of a sudden it's a level playing field. The Braves might have 5 better starting pitchers than Philly, and that might help them throughout the course of the regular season. But in 4 games, we saw the advantage when it came to pitching was clearly belonging to the Phillies in that one. Last thing I want to say about this series, what did you guys make of Acuna? Because there's a lot of talk out there about Acuna's effort in this series. I mean, that Real Muto inside the park home run, if he's doing his job as a right fielder and backing up center, knowing, I know it's not his home field, but you have to know that wall in left center in Philly can make some crazy ricochets happen. He didn't even move from right field on that play. Rec, what did you think as a teammate? How incensed would that leave you?
In that spot, I would be. I don't know what the word is. It's not inconsolable, but I would be livid. I would be furious. Realistically, we've seen this from Acuna before. He's gotten benched for things like this before, not hustling to first, not doing things really the way that you should. And in a spot like that, in the playoffs, when it becomes so obvious, the little things are what win you and lose you games. And backing up your fellow outfielder, even on a ball hit to left center, if you're the right fielder, you should at least be moving that way. I don't need you on a dead sprint. I get it. Probably won't be needed. But at least moving in that direction, because when something happens and you're not there, you're going to look like an idiot. And realistically, that's what happened. So to me, this is just one of those kind of classic cases of young guys who haven't quite learned how to play the game the right way yet. Realistically, because they haven't been forced to enough. I think Sticker's actually done a nice job with this team, with the youth that they have on this team, and telling them at times like, hey, you're going to play the game the right way, putting them in situations and benching guys mid-game. He's done it. But in this scenario, this is a guy who just continues to feel like he's, I don't want to say better than the game, but obviously like there's some kind of not enough level of care, just desire, urgency. Like, and it's really sad because he can be such a great player. You could see he wasn't himself this whole year, coming off the knee injury and everything. He wasn't the same guy.
Still led the league in stolen bases, didn't he?
100%. So, but realistically, like he's still an explosive, athletic, important part of that lineup. And if you're not doing what you need to, both offensively and defensively, I don't know what you're capable of, I should say, which is in that case effort. It's not coachable. Like that's just something you do. There's no 2 ways around that. And I was a guy who, my big league career was not based off of talent. It was based off of effort and the fact that I was there and I wanted to put in the time and I wanted to do. So to see guys that don't, it's hard to see. But look, that's the line that you kind of walk when you have these young superstars and you treat them like superstars. Fernando Tatis Jr. and everything he's gone through in the last couple of years. I mean,
silver spoon.
The same thing, and it's unfortunate because I don't want to assume that anyone's going to act this way when they come up, but you could see how it happens, and I don't blame them. I mean, it's hard if everyone was giving me everything from the time I was 18 on or 16 on or whatever. That can get to your head. You're not mature enough for that yet, and you end up doing things like this. It's just part of the game right now. But hopefully he learns his lesson, and at least for the Braves' sake, because I don't like seeing players out on the field like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was stunned watching that, because no disrespect to Real Muto. Look, he's probably the fastest catcher out there. He's a great hitter. That should not have been an inside the park home run.
He's the fastest catcher since probably 2018.
Since you retired?
Oh, is that what happened after 2018? Oh, maybe.
Where were you in terms of catchers? Because we've talked about your sprint speed, how you were 50th percent among major leaguers. Did they break it down by position?
No, I have no idea. I never even knew I was 50th percentile. But
you had to be like top 15, 20%.
I better have been.
I mean,
I better have been. I better still be.
Well, I think you're a little leaner now than you were in your playing days, right?
Leaner?
Are you? Most guys, a lot of guys when they retire, they usually get a little leaner.
I have less muscle. I won't comment on the other half, though.
Unreal. Tyler, let's take it to the Padres-Dodgers series, man.
How do I just naturally transition after what was just said? Padres-Dodgers. Oh my! I mean, funny enough, a buddy of mine, part of the Bleav network for Bleav in Chargers, Borna, he covers the Padres on YouTube, very similar to what I do for the Mets. And we met up at Game 1 in Citi Field because he flew from San Diego, New York for the game. Of course, he had a great weekend. I did not, for many reasons. And he actually might be flying out to Philly this weekend. So I might be attending one of those NLCS games for fun just because I can. But that series was even wilder. I mean, talk about the Dodgers having a 3-0 lead going into the 7th. And then the Padres put up a 5 spot. Josh Hader's back to being Josh Hader again. Trent Grisham acting like Barry Bonds out here, not only against the Mets, but against the Dodgers too. I mean, it's funny because when I think about the Dodgers, I know that they are that team that you want to base everything off of. The Mets want to be the Dodgers way, and for a lot of good reasons. But the Dodgers now have, for the most part, dominated that NL West division for a decade straight, and all they have is a COVID-shortened season World Series ring to show for it. Now, I understand that winning a World Series is one of the hardest things to do in all sports. But again, with the way that the Dodgers develop and have paid smartly year after year after year, it is truly baffling to see them get kicked the way that they did to a Padres team that, not completely far off from the Phillies, wasn't playing the best baseball in the final month, especially the second half. They had their ups and downs. They were the opposite of consistent all year long, and they got momentum against the Mets, and they never looked back, just like the Phillies. These teams are awfully similar and riding that hot wave, and that's why this is going to be really exciting NLCS, unprecedented one, rather. Something that, who would have predicted? Padres, Phillies, the two sub-90 win teams in this matchup. It's bizarre, but I got to say, from the NL standpoint, I'm obviously rooting for the Padres, especially if you beat my Mets. I want you to win the whole damn thing. So hopefully the Padres can try and do that.
Yeah, by the way, speaking of Borna and his Chargers show, I do want to let you guys know that I actually passed up on sick free tickets to the Chargers-Broncos game that is going on right now to be here with you guys tonight. I
want to let you know that thank you for passing up on that, but fix your mic.
Again with the mic?
Guys, this schmuck waited to record in the studio today instead of being at his home to have better audio, and we're getting the same static again and again. What are you doing? I don't understand.
I'm just gonna
just exit. Just get out of here. We'll see you next week, Jeff. Oh my god, that's funny. All right, well, while he tries to fix his technical issues, Rec, pivoting back to you, you look at the series that did conclude from the Mariners. You saw Cal Riley doing great things. It was great to see that because I know he's been your guy. What was your overall take from that sweep? That was a wild game, like an 18-inning game between those two. I mean, Seattle, they for the longest time, they were acting like I didn't hear no bell. And unfortunately, they did by the time you got to the 17th, 18th inning. But I do want to know, what is your biggest takeaway from that series? Because for me, I mean, how can you still not be excited if you're a Mariners fan about the future?
That's it. That's my biggest takeaway. These Mariners are good. They're really good. They weren't ready to take that last step and finish off some of these games. And unfortunately, look, that's a learning curve that we all go through as professional athletes. You kind of have to take that one beating before you kind of jump over the horse. You could talk about the Royals when they beat us in 15. You could talk about Was it the Cubs the year that they went it the next year? They did the same thing, got to the playoffs, got swept out, and then came back the next year and performed better. So that's just something that happens throughout the course of this. And they're going to learn from this, but they are dangerously good. That starting rotation, that young pitching that they have is awesome. They're every bit legit, especially with the addition of Castillo, of course. That bullpen is really good. Obviously, they let some lead slip, and that's where it got to them. But, I think you could talk about Service and the way that he used that bullpen. I think the coaching staff could take a couple lessons from that. And then offensively, that team can compete, man. I don't care. A lot of people were saying, "Oh, they're just not good enough offensively." Not good. I know they went 17 innings without scoring, 18 innings without scoring a run, but so did the Astros up until the 18th inning. So realistically, that was just an incredible playoff baseball game, longest ever, game to be scoreless in postseason history, and actually tied the longest game in postseason history. So to me, that Mariners team is fast and on the rise. And of course, that Astros team is as good as we thought, as good as we said they were coming into the playoffs, because they were able to survive that Mariners team. That series could have easily went the opposite way in 3 games. All 3 of those games could have went the other way. And it was just really impressive to see that Mariners team for me.
What about you, Joe? What was your biggest takeaway from, the Mariners? I know that their run fell short, but also, getting into the final series as yet to conclude at the time of us being live here between the Yanks and the Guardians.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to add anything to what Rec just said about the Mariners and Astros.
Oh my God, Joe!
No, because your mic's worse. Goodness gracious!
You can't make this shit up.
Just keep dabbling with it. It's okay. It's okay. I just don't understand. I just don't understand why. And now Joe froze. Ooh, that should be Joe Burr. Joe Burr. Oh God. Okay.
Just a little technical issue.
We'll bring him back in. For people that are listening on audio, they're probably like, "What the hell's going on?" Joe's coming in and out of the stream. That's what's going on right now. Let's see. Let's see.
Me old. Like I don't know how to deal with technology. And look at him.
Is this better? Is this better?
Over here.
Yes.
Unplug.
Go. Just go.
All I did was unplug everything and plug it back in. I guess that's what Rec tells people to do at his day job.
Yeah.
Have you tried turning
it
off
and
turning
it
back on? No, look, it's tough to add anything to what Rec said about the Mariners. They could have easily swept Houston just as easily as Houston swept them. I mean, what was the difference in that series, right? 2 late Yordan Alvarez homers in game 1 and game 2. And then just an 18th inning. I mean, first team to score. What, did the mic go again?
It's
on. Where do you guys laugh?
I don't know.
Jesus. This is a shit show.
Let's keep going.
My biggest takeaway moving forward, though, is the Mariners pitching. I mean, George Kirby, what he did, that was one of the gutsiest playoff performances I've ever seen from a rookie, right? 24 years old and going out there giving 7 scoreless in an elimination game, right, with his back against the wall. Kirby's incredible. Castillo's going to be there longer. Logan Gilbert, another young guy. The Mariners pitching and, young bats, guys like Julio Rodriguez, atop the lineup, they're going to be around for a long time. People in Seattle, they've waited 20 plus years for this. They're going to have a nice little run coming up.
If they start locking some of these guys up, a la the Braves, I mean, it's going to be fun to watch. I hope they can. I hope they do it because Jerry DiPoto, if you're listening, I know you're not, but I'll call you later, you bastard. Just lock those dudes up because they are legit. I love that team. I really do. Like, if there's one team I'm going to follow next year as much as the Mets, maybe a little bit less than the Mets, it's going to be those Mariners.
Oh, yeah.
There's nothing about them that isn't fun, that isn't awesome. And by the way, what's I don't even know the answer to this. I should have looked it up before I came on. What is Eugenio Suarez's contract situation? Because his year was incredible. I mean, I don't know if he can do that again, but he was a big part of everything that they did.
If he didn't sign an extension, I want to say he's either. Does he have an option
right now?
I know he doesn't have a long contract because I remember looking up his stuff when the Mets were linked with him. Like,
they wouldn't have agreed to take on too much of his money. I mean, I know they took on obviously some of it.
He's been the biggest winner in that trade between him
Suarez
and Winker.
Is with him 23 and 24. And in 2025, there is what kind of option? Club option for 15 mil.
Wow. So they have him for 3 more years if they want him.
Yeah, he's already 32. I mean, it depends on what he does the next 2 years, but 2 to 3
All
more
he's got to
years.
do is hit homers. That's
Yeah,
it.
he can be
He
their
can do that.
DH. You know. But
And Cal Raleigh, don't forget Cal Raleigh was also playing with a torn UCL in his thumb in
ooh,
that
good point.
ALDS. So he's having surgery. I mean, the big dumper, he's going to be there for a while.
Very,
Love that
very
guy.
Brett Beatty of him.
Rec, you should have trademarked that nickname when you could have.
Yeah, but I feel like that would have taken away from it a little bit, Joe. Just saying.
Fair enough. But yeah, Cal Raleigh, I mean, and I've had that exact injury, by the way, a UCL tear in the thumb. That's painful. The fact that he was playing, I mean, I don't even know how he was gripping a bat.
How did that happen to you, Joe? How'd you do that?
That was actually playing basketball. Only sport. I was a 3-sport guy in high school. Only sport. I mean, what'd you think was happening, Rack?
I was just asking a question. I don't know, Joe.
I'll
What do you
tell
mean?
you what. I'll tell you what. To my point about Cal Raleigh gripping a bat makes gripping wood very difficult. That kind
There
of
you go.
injury.
See?
Very difficult. But yeah, I happened to be playing
that one.
playing basketball. I was blocking a shot, and I was playing at the local gym, right, getting ready for the school season, and I was playing up against these guys that were like built like you, but like 5'5" by 5'5", right? And the guy's going up for a layup, and I'm 15, I weigh nothing, and I get a hand on it, and he keeps pushing the ball, and my thumb touched my forearm. That was not a fun UCL tear. Yeah.
So now you know how to threaten him, Tyler, if he ever gives you any problems. Be like, oh, you remember that 5'5" guy?
Well, you go for the knees. Go for the knees, get a little choke going on, they're done. Easy work.
Tyler, if you want to talk about choking me, that's going to have to happen off the air, all right, buddy?
Like it hasn't already.
This show is taking a left turn. All right.
Okay. All right.
Jeez.
So final thing before we get
Guardians,
into
Yanks?
the Mets. It's the game that still has yet to start, I believe, between the Yankees and the Guardians. Talk about this series.
They're going to get it in
I
tonight.
mean,
They're going to get it in tonight.
You think they're going to get it in?
Can they?
Yeah.
That's fine. I'll watch it.
That's
I'm
all
watching
the
the
weather
Ranger game
reports
right
on
now, and then I can put on the Yanks game after. That's fine.
They better get it in. I mean, come
tomorrow,
on.
If they wait
That'd
till
be
tomorrow,
brutal.
it's going to be such a better game, though. If you do it like a day game tomorrow, you're going to have, instead of Tyone versus Savali, you're going to have Bieber
They have
versus
to turn around
Cortez.
and play whoever wins has to turn around and play the next day.
So is life. I mean,
Look, I agree, but if I'm a player, I want to get this thing in tonight. I guess, yeah, because you have to go to Houston regardless, no matter which team you are. So
yeah,
I want to get it in
MLB's
tonight and fly out. I want to get to Houston as early as possible.
But the MLB is already devalued days off for travel days, right? You're not going to have a day off between Game 5 and Game 6 in the LCS. You didn't between Games 4 and Games
all the more
5.
reason that you need to get this in now, so you have the day off before the series starts.
No, but I'm saying from a league perspective, because they've already shown that they're doing away with off days for travel days. Wouldn't the MLB prefer a Cortez Bieber elimination game matchup as opposed to Savali Tyone?
See, Derek here agrees.
Would Bieber start? It would still be on short rest for Bieber, wouldn't it?
Didn't he go? He went Game 2.
He went Friday. Yeah, but Game 2 got pushed back, remember?
So Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So that would be 3 days rest for Bieber.
Yeah. It still wouldn't even be regular rest for him.
I still feel like
Kenzie
Cleveland
went
would run him
Saturday.
out there. Maybe run him out there as an opener. I mean, Savali in an elimination game. I mean, neither of these.
I agree. Yeah, but he's only going one time through the lineup. He's not going. If he goes two, that's it. Look at his 2 starts against the Yankees this year. He actually was really good for the first time through the lineup in both starts.
Yeah, and by the way, I was crunching
First time through the lineup, he was great. So let him go one time through the lineup. You have pretty much everyone in your bullpen except for Morgan.
Yeah.
Roll them all out. And they have plenty of bullpen arms. This team is one of the best bullpen teams. Actually, I think they have the best bullpen ERA in baseball this year. So all out there, man.
Most of the teams left standing, their bullpens have been absolutely ridiculous.
Yes.
San Diego had a middle of the pack bullpen most of the regular season, but their bullpen hasn't given up anything this postseason.
They turned it up.
Went to the freaking Mexican League. All of a sudden, he comes out. He's throwing 100. He's like 32 years old, and he's like, out of nowhere.
And Hater again.
Surprising how good they've been too. I mean, Philly's bullpen from the second half on was among the best in baseball. Not a lot of people talk about that. Transitioning to postseason, similar results there. Astros, which again have been a little up and down. Their pitching overall is still stellar though. Everyone. And the one team that has had an up and down bullpen is that same team in the New York Yankees. So I want to ask you guys, starting with you, Rec, What's your predictions for Game 5 of that matchup between themselves and the Guardians? And then from there, what do you like to see the remainder of postseason play out for both the ALCS, NLDS, and then eventually a World Series matchup?
I actually really like Cleveland's chances in this Game 5. It's one of those situations where I think they've had enough success as a young team already in this postseason that I don't think their lack of experience is as big of a factor as it would be had they had some failures already. They haven't really had many failures, especially some of their young guys like Oscar Gonzalez, who's had a couple of huge hits for them. Steven Kwan's been big for them. Ramirez is always great for them. Jimenez is the only guy really that out of their young guys that hasn't really shown up the way that I expected him to. But it can happen at any moment, and he could take over the game tonight and be the guy who wins it for them. Like I said, their bullpen's really good, and I think if Savali can give them one time through the lineup, one time through the lineup, 9 outs. And if you look at his last start against the Yankees, he was pretty much 1-2-3, 1-2-3, 1-2-3. Then that second time is when they got him. A couple of home runs and some other stuff, and that's when they started putting runs on him. But realistically, if he can get through one time, and Judge has struggled against Savali too, that would be so big for this team. And I really think they would have everything they need. The recipe would be set for them to take it and go on. And then if they go on, I can't. This goes back to like my predictions for the playoffs in general. Like I didn't really have many upsets at all because when you look on paper, which is how I judge teams, the Astros are just so good. They're so good. So I can't go anywhere past them. I still give Cleveland a shot. I mean, between Bieber and McKenzie, who should be at least fairly well rested for that series and ready to go. Like I think Bieber could go game 1, McKenzie would go game 2, and they could go from there. I give them a shot, but realistically, that Houston team with all that pitching they're coming at you with, it's going to be tough because they have a lineup too. But I think the one thing that you can say about Cleveland is they can be scrappy. They can put the ball in play, which we said about the Mets. It just didn't work out for them. And they can get hot and they can go on a roll. I think when you look at this NLCS though, between the Padres and Phillies, that's going to be anybody's game. I mean, if I had to put money on someone, I'd probably put it on the Padres just because on paper, I still think they're obviously the better team. But the way Philly's playing, it's like, how do I say they can't win? Of course they can win. I hate it when I see, pundits, they have no shot. They can't win this. They're terrible. Like, dude, it's sports, guy. Like, that's why we play these games. Like, that's not how it works. And we've seen it already this playoffs.
What about you, Joe?
How about the LA Times article that said if there was ever a year where the playoffs should have been canceled and the regular season should have determined the champ, it was this year with the Dodgers. Like the LA Times.
They got jinxed from day one.
You guys really want to discredit yourselves that much? Your one championship is like a Mickey Mouse 60-game World Series since 1988.
Okay, guys. Wait.
No.
I can't let you keep saying
that. Come on.
They won the same playoff setup that every other team had. It doesn't matter if it's
and like the Marlins made the playoffs that year. I mean,
that made it harder for them. They would have had home field advantage the whole time. The Dodgers would have had home field advantage the whole playoffs. They made it harder for them that they couldn't play at home.
I don't know. Home field advantage. They're all gone by the 7th inning. It's LA. Come on. They're not real fans.
You're
Rec, what did you set an alarm? Is that you, Rec, going off?
That's for me to take out my garbage. Okay, guys? I forget to take out my garbage sometimes.
8:47. Tell Joe I'm getting the F out of here.
That is because I need to take out my garbage. Monday and Thursday night, my alarm goes off at 8:47. Anthony, take out your garbage, and I still forget.
Such a specific time. How did you get to that time? 8:47. How did that?
I think I already had it set for something else, like randomly, and then when I was like, okay, I need to set an alarm for garbage, I just clicked on it every Monday and Thursday. Hey, look at that. I'm even technically savvy enough to make it go off every Monday and Thursday. That's pretty good, right, Joe? Unlike your wired headphones that get plugged into your mic because you can't figure out Bluetooth.
All right. You know what? I'm in the Bleav studios right now. So any issues, I can't actually take responsibility.
I'm not talking about your issues. I'm talking about the fact that you're still wearing a wire out of your ear.
I know. I look like Walter from There's Something About Mary. I get it. You see my baseball?
All right, Joe, what's your prediction?
We got to get to the Mets, so I'll be quick here. Guardians are going to win game 5, especially if Tyone's the pitcher, because the Guardians strike out at a lower clip than any other team in baseball. They're masters at putting the ball in play. Tyone's not a strikeout guy. Garrett Cole's going to get the best of this Guardians lineup like we've seen him do twice already this series. Tyone's not going to do that. Guy might have a great record, 14-5 this year, but he's pitched to an ERA near 5 since June 1st. Savali, on the flip side, who has a bad ERA for the full season since July 7th, it's a 3.3. He's actually figured things out as the season's progressed. Tyone's gotten worse. I think the Cleveland Guardians have a much better bullpen, much more consistent bullpen. So if they're going to play Pepper on Tyone, string together some hits, it all comes down to preventing the long ball, which I think they can do, especially, Rec, to your point, if Savali just goes through the order one time and it becomes a bullpen game. Moving forward, Rec, I'm with you. I don't see how Cleveland can get past Houston. I mean, they're just, I think, so far and above everyone else that I think Houston's going to win the World Series in 5 over the Padres, who I think have a little team of destiny thing going on here.
Yeah.
Don't forget the Padres, they've done all this with, I'd say, fairly minimal production from Machado and Soto. I mean, if you consider the guys that have come up huge for San Diego, you know, Cronenworth's hit some big homers. Grisham's obviously playing out of his mind. Even Nola's had some big hits. I think San Diego gets past Philly in 7, loses to the Stros in 5.
I like those picks. You know, the Astros, they're proving, especially in the scenario where the Yanks do fall. If they do, then okay to get some more benefit of the doubt here. But Astros are the only top dog that is proving not to be a fraud right now. Let's keep it real. You know, they took care of Seattle. They did exactly what they needed to do. Wasn't necessarily the easiest wins, but Yordan Alvarez putting the team on his back in the first 2 games, right? As you'd expect from arguably the best DH in baseball. Then to grind out in Seattle, you know, I want to give Mariners the edge in that game. You even had the Kane Felix Hernandez coming out to throw first pitch. All the vibes were with the Mariners and their fans, but it still wasn't enough. And that just shows you that the Astros, they're a top dog. And I know that everyone loves to rag on the trash cans. Doesn't denounce how talented that team is and has been for a while.
Wait. I will say one thing. Go ahead.
Yeah.
And I want this. I want to say this.
Yeah.
They got to Seattle and suddenly couldn't hit for 18 innings. And, I mean, 1 home run. Guys, I'm sorry, but I'm not. They looked dead in that game 1. And suddenly in the 8th and 9th inning, they jumped on 2 pitches like they knew what was coming.
Oh.
You think
Oh, no.
I have no idea. But this is the problem. This is the problem with cheating. You opened the door to this. And I, as, first of all, someone who competed against you, but B, someone who also watches and cares tremendously about the game and its integrity, cannot ever forget that. I can forgive you, but if it happens and something looks fishy and smells fishy, like, I mean, you guys were all over Joe Musgrove's ears, right? Like, it looked weird. I'm sorry, but that game 1, that looked odd. Bregman, all of a sudden, like, just whack. I mean, Altuve looked lost the whole series, but Bregman, I mean, Alvarez is just a great hitter. But I don't know, man. Look at their splits. Look at their team splits. Look at Bregman's splits. They're insane home road splits.
You think Dusty Baker would allow that? You think Dusty Baker?
It doesn't matter if your manager allowed it. You don't. It's not like he has to know everything that's going on, right?
I think
who knows. I don't know.
I mean, AJ Hinch knew. I think the manager would know what was going on.
There were rumors of teams that had a cameraman out in, you know, whatever center field with a light that would go on or off depending on what the pitch was. There were rumors of players who had guys literally in the stands that they could see that would do something if they, you know, to tell them what pitch was coming with binoculars. And so I don't know. I don't put anything past these guys. It's the same way with PED guys. You know, if you get caught once, it's like, okay, well, you obviously you didn't have the moral fiber to not do it. So why do I trust that you're going to suddenly just, oh, I got caught once, I'm not going to do it again. Wow, nice face, Joe. What are we doing here? This guy's a clown. Absolute clown.
Joe, where's your camera?
What do you got over your camera there, Joe?
Here, I have one counter for you though, Rick.
Go ahead.
The Astros, while what they did was terrible, we know that. It was seemed like it was more advanced than what any other team was doing at the time. They were used as a poster boy because there have been numerous reports from players themselves out there saying that the Astros weren't the only ones cheating, maybe not a too far fashion than them. So, question you is, if we know that this is going on beyond the Astros, but the Astros were really that first big example of doing it so blatant and as horrendous as they did, should we still have that same spotlight on them versus other clubs just because they're used as the poster boy? Because again, they're not the only team that's doing stuff.
The fact is, you're the ones who got caught, you're the ones who got punished, and you're always going to be the ones who are remembered by it. So sometimes
I understand that aspect.
Sometimes being the kid who gets caught is just who you are, and you can't shake that. So it's not about look, was there other cheating? Honestly, I don't know. I was never on a team where guys were relaying stuff live from TVs or from right field. Like, not that I knew of. Maybe, who knows? Maybe. But I know there were, guys who at the plate who liked it if there was a runner on second and they could get the signs relaying it to them. Like, look, that happened. And that's, as a catcher, I had to try to avoid that. I hated it. I thought it was ridiculous. I never wanted anyone to show me a sign because if you told me a curveball was coming, I'd swing at it just because I saw a curveball. I wasn't. But I don't know. That's just my opinion. Everyone's allowed to have their own opinion. I don't care. But to me, that's just. I see these things and it pops in my head. Like I can't help it.
Understandable. All right, Joe.
I don't know what the hell's going on with the camera. Can you guys hear me?
We hear you, but there's
it's the same crappy audio.
all this waiting in the studio for this. We're 40 minutes into the show. Can we talk about the Mets now? I'm sorry. We gotta. We have to at least at minimum give like a half hour of this team, okay? We can't do 40 minutes of
half hour?
We went 40. You want to be quick with playoffs.
There's like a
we went 40 minutes playoffs, Rick. You said we got to do
what
it
is
quick.
there to talk about for the Mets for a half hour that we're not going to get into in the offseason? That's what I want to know, Tyler.
Exactly.
Wait, that we won't.
We're at 40.
That we won't get into in the offseason.
Fair.
I mean, it's their offseason now, but it's not offseason yet. But anyway, we want to talk about the Mets. Okay, let's go. Tyler, you take it away. Who are gonna be? And because this is, I think, the first place you start, right? It's got to be about the free agency, guys that are potentially leaving. We talked about this a couple episodes ago. It's gonna look like a different team. So go ahead. Let's start there.
Yeah, I mean, there's right around 13 free agents that the Mets are going to be dealing with this offseason. Yeah. Oh, look, he looks like he just came out of the womb. Congratulations, Joe. Happy to have you here.
Okay, now lower you're like at the bottom of the screen, Joe. You look like you're 4 foot tall.
There we go. I look like Tyler? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yes. You son of a bitch. All right.
So you know what happened?
I didn't do that on purpose, Tyler. I'm sorry.
I know. It's just any short joke it's set up. That's how
when
it is.
I unplugged and replugged the camera, it went to my computer camera, which half of it was being covered by the webcam instead of automatically the webcam.
Okay. All right. Back to free agents.
You know, I could never be cheating on the Astros. I'm too dumb to navigate that shit.
Wait, guys, how does it work again? I hit the can once guys. For a fastball or twice?
Get canceled.
We're not going to deep dive all the nitty gritty about the free agents in the show because, again, we have all offseason to talk about this. My point, though, is that, yes, exactly, Rick, this team is expected to look quite different next year. And out of the multiple reports that have come out since the offseason has begun for the Mets, I just want to pinpoint the following things, and then you guys let me know your thoughts on maybe what was your biggest takeaway from all this, okay? So the Mets, their top dogs for agency starts with Jacob deGrom, Edwin Diaz, Brandon Nimmo, and Chris Bassett. Those are your key four on what their futures are going to be, along with really, for the most part, the entire bullpen. There's a lot of pieces of this team that, again, very well could be on different rosters next year. And among those free agents, it has been reported that there is one key player that the Mets are viewed as already going to be strongly pursuing before free agency begins, and that is their star closer in Edwin Diaz. So he's someone that if you guys want to expand on a little bit, we can. Other than that, though, Jacob deGrom and Billy Epler did have themselves a strong meeting, a positive one, rather, right as the season was concluding. It seemed like that there was nothing wrong there. I don't know if that's going to be a help or not into what's going on with the debates, discussions rather, between Jake and Epler. And what do you have to say, Joe? What are you giggling about?
Can we shout out Bobby G for the comment? Did you see his comment?
No, I didn't see his comment.
Bobby
Rec, it's
G goes,
8:57. You still haven't taken.
That's good. I like that.
I like this guy.
Bobby, remind me again at 9:07, please.
Only
we'll call that the snooze button right there. Snooze. I just snoozed you. Remind me again in 10 minutes.
Oh my God, this
Only
is such
ending
a
in
sick
sevens.
show. Thank you, Bobby. We appreciate you. So from there, Brandon Nimmo has reportedly wanted to return to the Mets. You know, there's a lot of guys on once they hit free agency, they don't necessarily say what desire, if at all, they have in returning to that club. Nimmo, who's been a part of the Mets organization his whole career, little Wyoming boy, comes to Big Apple, and he's loved every second of it. So hopefully the Mets can, in fact, bring him back, unless there's this guy, Aaron Judge, that could say something differently. I think that's the only debate into not bringing Brandon Nimmo back, in my humble opinion, at least. Again, if I'm wrong, that's perfectly fine. You know, what we've seen is that Steve Cohen, there's been some rather controversial things going back and forth with how much is he willing to spend this offseason. It has been reported already that Cohen is expected basically take the exact same approach with Billy Epler as he did last offseason. You know, are the Mets going to be around a $300 million payroll again, or are they going to be upwards of 350 that could really take them over the top? We don't know, but these are things that are constantly being discussed in the organization, and we'll see how the offseason plays out from there. And that's really it for the most part. Those are all your key Mets updates with what's going on right now. So starting with you, Joe, what is your biggest takeaway with the Mets offseason approach, especially with having so many key players on the brink of not returning potentially, mainly that rotation and that bullpen?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway is Jacob deGrom is probably the third biggest priority in terms of guys that they need to re-sign. For me, it's Diaz, clear as day, number one. I mean, the Mets did not lose a game all year that they led going into the ninth inning. Did not lose one all year. That doesn't happen. So I think that Diaz is the guy. And I think Brandon Nimmo, based on positional value and what is out there and what is available in free agency, I think Brandon Nimmo might be more important to bring him back than deGrom. And it's not a knock on Jake. It's not a knock on him for the Atlanta start, for the Oakland start, the Chicago start. Not at all a knock on Jake. It's just a matter of availability, right? Nimmo's always there. Nimmo's always in the lineup. You look at 2021 when, you know, Nimmo was the only guy in that lineup who was hitting. I mean, we had guys hitting fourth and fifth that were like, who the hell are these guys? And Nimmo was out there every day grinding, giving it his all. The only outfielder I think who's better, especially center fielder, is, you know, Judge. And frankly, I think that's a long shot times 20. I don't think Aaron Judge is coming to Queens. So I think bringing Nimmo back is really, really important. Even if you say, oh, well, they can go get a corner outfielder and move Marte to center. I don't think Starling Marte
No, I don't think you want to do
young
that.
enough or healthy enough to be a center fielder anymore.
You do not put Marte at this point in his career back in center after playing him right all year.
So I think Diaz and Nimmo are the priorities. I think that they've both expressed, you know, to be honest, more than Jake, that they want to be Mets. Brandon Nimmo, we all know, you know, like, come on, he still drives, what, like a 2011 Altima? Like, he's the most humble guy. I don't think $10 million is going to make him want to change markets, change teams, change relationships, friendships, you know, and everything he's got going on with the Mets. And Diaz, I think, has really become comfortable in New York after an awful first year. He's settled in. He's been dominant, not just for this year, but for the last 3 years. And I think Diaz, you know, he had that dinner at Steve Cohen's house. We, of course, debated what was on the menu. I think Diaz is comfortable with the Mets. I think he wants to be here. Jake, I mean, look, Epler can come out and make the PR statement that the meeting went great and he wants to be here and yada, yada, yada. Jake hasn't shown, I think, the fan base that he wants to be a Met and that he's committed long-term to the Mets. No hard feelings towards Jake. I will always love him. I mean, what he did in the 2015 postseason was absolutely ridiculous. But right now, almost 35 years old. He'll be 34 and a half or 34 and 10 months when the season starts. He's been injured for the greater part of the last 2 years. I don't know if he's as important as Diaz or Nimmo. That said, we need starting pitching because we only have one returning starter from this year's 5-man rotation being Max for next year. Plus, of course, maybe McGill and Peterson.
Isn't Bassett on a mutual option, by the way?
Well, there's an option. Yeah.
Yeah, but what's likely going to happen with Bassett though is he's going to decline what the Mets offer him, and then they'll go from there. He's not going to get 20 mil, but I could see Bassett probably getting into that.
But his option is for 19.
Oh, so that's true.
If he's not going to
get the qualifying offer is like 19 now, I believe, as well.
His mutual option is 19, and the qualifying offer, I Bleav, was 19. I don't remember the exact number.
I'll be
19,565
slightly disappointed if
or
he
something
doesn't
like that.
take that then, assuming that the Mets offer it. Whether they do or not, though, is
Unless he wants more
I,
years.
I think I think they both take the option. To be honest with you, I think he likes pitching in New York. That's just my opinion. So look, that's hearsay. So that's why I don't really want to get into him too much. With DeGrom, and this is the one thing I'll say. With Sandy leaving, Sandy Alderson obviously stepping down, and then wanting to find a new president and everything. I know Billy was making the decisions, but Sandy had a voice too. And with Sandy, there was always a backdrop of an entertainment value to players and his signings. And I think it's going to be interesting to see if this front office has any of that, because if entertainment is still any part of this, and I think with Steve Cohen, it probably will be, that means Jake is coming back. That's just my opinion. Because we know what this city and what this team, this town, everything, what Major League Baseball turns into on nights that Jake starts nowadays. If healthy, it is the Jacob deGrom show, and they will put it on every billboard and everywhere, and it'll be all about him. And the one thing I'll say is I don't know that he loves that. I don't know that he wants that.
that's true.
He wants to win. He's a competitor. He's a simple man. And so I could see him looking elsewhere, but I could also see the Mets overpaying him. And I say that in the obviously the lightest regard, because how do you overpay a man who's, when he's healthy, is probably the best pitcher in the game? But realistically, they overpaid Scherzer. I said that last year. I'd still say that. And they will overpay for DeGrom if they're thinking along those lines. Now, I've heard, what Cohen said. I'll pay whatever, 300 million, 350, who knows? I would be really surprised if they honestly had a payroll of $300 million, especially to start the year next year. And I say that because despite the fact that he's a fan and he might be disappointed in what happened this year, he's still a businessman. And these guys don't take things lightly. He doesn't want, I shouldn't say this. In my opinion, I don't think he's going to want a team that he is going to have to overpay drastically in order to get wins. And because I think this team, with the right moves, any team with the right moves, they have enough core and guys they can bring back, like Nimmo, who I agree with, Edwin Diaz, they should absolutely bring back, that they shouldn't need to overpay too many people to have a successful year, and give themselves an opportunity to get to the trade deadline. Maybe we start to see some of these young guys that they held on to start to come up and pay dividends. And I think that's where this team can really make up some ground with the rest of baseball. Does that happen next season, though? I don't know. And that's the thing I want to wait to kind of dig more into this offseason until I really give like a final, this is what the Mets should do.
Okay. There's a lot of breakdown for both of you guys. Great thoughts. And for me, starting with Steve Cohen, going back to you, Rec, I just don't foresee a world where he doesn't spend at minimum $300 million, because of the fact that even at $300 million, you could rightfully argue that this team is still not nearly in the position that they should or could be versus what they were this year. If you're at $300 million with what they have to pay, they're not going to be able to bring back a good amount of guys. They're going to have to go for more budget things, hope that the prospects really start to pan out, and maybe give them more of a leash than you should be at their young careers. Like, there's a lot of question marks with that versus heading into this past season where they had $300 million because they had all these guys currently on their contracts. Now, with a lot of things that are open right now, with the amount of free agents that they have available, I just don't. Bobby said
Bobby
Rec
G.
907. So there you go, Rec. Once the show ends, we got to make sure first things first to get that trash out. But yeah, I really don't see a world where one Cohen doesn't at minimum go $300 million. I will take things a step further. This is me putting all bias as a fan aside. From everything that I'm learning about this organization, I will be surprised if they don't surpass $300 million with just how much money that they owe to, at minimum, the likes of Diaz and potentially Chris Bassett. I mean, even if they don't bring Jake back, they still have a lot of spending that they need to do for that bullpen alone. And then we know what this team looks like from an offensive standpoint. They're missing one big bat. So again, we're going to get into all of that further in the offseason, but that's just my personal standpoint on Cohen right now. Because if you build the way that you do by spending through free agency, this allows a Dodgers way where you can continue to do that. And then the whole point is having this consistent winner. Once these future guys are up with contracts, that the Mets will be better at developing players by then, where they won't have to shell out these big deals as often. They're doing it now because they're trying to make way and room for their prospects and not trade them away. In essence, that's why I don't see Shohei Ohtani coming here this offseason, for example. I think if he comes here, it'll be via free agency, for example. Like guys like that, those are moves that the Mets won't be able to make right now, but within a couple years, then they'll start to be more comfortable shelling out that farm because they have the depth. They're just not there yet, comfortably, in my opinion. But going back to Jake, Joe, I was a little taken back by you. I understand there's a lot of hot debates with Jacob deGrom on if the Mets should bring him back or not. For me, this feels like a Tom Seaver situation. This feels for me the same way that Steve Cohen put out that letter for Mets fans when he first bought this team and explained how distraught he was when the Mets parted way with Seaver. The same way that I know damn well, and I always say to you guys, that Zach Wheeler would still be a New York Met right now if Cohen didn't buy the team a year earlier. Again, unless Jacob deGrom truly does not want to be part of this organization anymore, where money is not the problem here, how do you foresee a world where he is not a New York Met, right?
Because I don't think Jacob deGrom starting 15 games a year is worth 45 mil, right? I don't have a problem paying him that if he's healthy.
I think you're damned if you don't, though. That's the thing. You take the risk of signing him, but you also take the risk of letting him walk more than likely to Atlanta.
I don't, Atlanta's like the hot rumor, right? Because he grew up a Braves fan and,
I don't think he's going
to
the
Atlanta going to pay him 45 mil? Atlanta doesn't pay anyone that kind
Maybe
of
he takes a pay
look
cut.
At the deals that Atlanta's giving out, I don't think Atlanta's going to rush to pay him 45 mil. I think
but
the
here's
team
the
that
thing.
might pay
Maybe
him
he takes
is Texas.
But maybe Texas has changed quite a bit with their how they're running their front office. So I don't think they're going to act nearly as stupid as what they were last year with Simeon and Seager. I thought that what they did to begin with was quite the overpay,
But they need pitching and they can afford him. And I think that they might spend stupidly for a guy like deGrom. Maybe not a guy like Simeon again, but a guy like deGrom. And look, Seager had a hell of a second half. I think Texas is the team that might outbid us for Jake. I think if he goes to Atlanta, then that was his plan all along. Because I don't think the Braves are going to pay him an exorbitant, absurd amount of money. Because the Braves don't pay. I mean, they got Acuna on an 8-year, $105 million deal. Like the Braves do not pay anyone stupid money. So yeah. I don't really see them outbidding us for Jake. If he goes to Atlanta,
it wouldn't be an outbidding.
Wants to go.
Yeah, no, it would certainly not be an outbidding. And I don't think there's a world where the Mets get outbid for Jake in any scenario. I don't even think Texas has a shot on Jake with truly spending. I think Steve Cohen will make sure that he puts his foot down and gives him the best offer imaginable from a monetary standpoint. But again, there's so many ways to look at this. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Yes, if the Mets lock up Jake to say, hypothetically, 4 or 5 year deal, and he's struggling with injuries every year going forward, yes, that's going to be looked at as a mistake, 100%. But then you see what can potentially happen if he stays healthy. He is arguably the best pitcher in the game. And let's keep in mind, hopefully with a normal, healthy offseason, who knows what Jake can be next year. We can't talk about age. With the Mets, with the stats that they are as a group right now, with having such little security in their rotation, you can't tell me that the Mets would be willing to basically drop back a little bit on the overall construction of the team by letting Jake walk. And let's say hypothetically Diaz goes, even though I don't think it's happening. Or just, again, be a lesser team next year on paper than what they are this year. You did not lock up Max Scherzer to that record-breaking deal to do exactly that in a win-now stage.
But are you going to then give Jake another record-breaking deal? Like for Jake, is it all about exceeding Scherzer's annual salary? I mean, Rec,
we don't know.
I really want you to chime in here because, with the Mets potentially having 4/5 of their 2022 rotation, with potential to walk, Bassett, Carrasco, Walker, all of options, Jake obviously opting out. I mean, would it be more effective to go get Carlos Rodon and Tyler Anderson or 2 guys cheaper than Jake might cost himself?
That was my opinion last year when they got Scherzer. Mm-hmm. It was, why did you not sign 2 guys for the price of 1? And I would say that's where in my opinion, it's always better to have quantity with quality, of course.
Mm.
If you can get two guys like Carlos Rodon for a Jacob DeGrom, um, come playoff time, if one of those two is hurt, you still have one. Come playoff time, if Jacob DeGrom is hurt, you got nobody. And so that's why, to me, if you can do that, it makes sense. Now, Rodon's going to probably cost more than he did last year,
Definitely.
because he cost about 20 million this year and shoved, and was really good for that Giants team. He was pretty much their only consistency. Logan Webb came
I
on
wanted
late this year,
Rodon
but
so bad. I was a
you know,
little taken back that the Mets didn't at least try
the
to get
stuff
that
was
done.
there. There was an injury history
Yep.
behind it, and they didn't feel comfortable, and I'm okay with that. But I just didn't get paying Max Scherzer $43 million. I really didn't. I understand what it looked like on paper to have him and DeGrom next to each other, but age and you know stuff's going to catch up to you. $43 million, like, I don't know. It just didn't make sense to me. So to me, I'm more interested in kind of how this plays out from Jake's perspective than I am the Mets' perspective. I think they do offer Jake more money than anybody else. I don't think that because I really do think Cohen cares about the entertainment value and holding on to his guys and showing really the baseball world that he's here to win. And I love that about him. But I think it just comes down to Jake. And realistically, um, you know, I don't talk to Jake much anymore. But even if I did, he's not going to tell me like, "Hey, yeah, I'm gonna sign here." Like, so it's going to come down to what him and his family want. And to me, just from what I know of him, I don't I don't I don't see any reason he personally would want to remain a New York Met more than being somewhere else. That's my opinion. That doesn't mean it. I know he values winning,
This is going to be on the cover of
and
the New York Post tomorrow. You do realize what you just said, right?
I know he values winning. And have they won with him here? Look, yes, in 15 we were good. We made a great run. Since then, has there been a year that hasn't ended in total disappointment?
He gave us a 1.7 ERA and went 11-8. I get the frustration.
Not him personally, as a team.
Yeah. Every year's been. I would
Every
say they've
year as a
underperformed
fan, you guys have
year.
been. Every year as a fan, you guys have been disappointed in the end of the year, right? 15. If you said you were disappointed, I'd smack you because, like, that was a hell of a run. And come on, like, I mean, get to the World Series.
How many
Obviously,
wins
I
did we
wish it
have in
would've went
2014? Like 78 wins in 2014, 79 wins.
Yep. I think we won 78 or 79. Yeah, both years, 13 and 14, leading up to that. So realistically, I guess what I'm saying is, as a player, you reach a certain point where it's like, okay, maybe it's just not meant to be. As good as this team seems to be, and we won 101 games this year, maybe it's just not meant to be here for me. And I just wonder if that is in the back of his mind. That's all. It's not. I'm not saying. I don't think there's anything wrong with a guy wanting to go home or wanting to be, somewhere else. I know the grass is greener thing. Like, I felt that way a lot when I was a player. I wouldn't blame any single player for doing making any decision, but, especially when it comes to free agency, because realistically, look, your call. You got to this point. You get to make whatever decision you want to make. And so I'm really interested to see, and we're going to know how this plays out. It's all on Jake's shoulders, to me. And if you're a Mets fan, I don't know if that makes you feel good or bad, but I think Cohen's going to be there with the money, and it's just going to be up to Jake.
Now, question. We think about free agents and the status of them and how they can potentially hold up teams from making further moves. Do you expect Jacob to have an impact? And if so, to what degree? Do you think it'll be significant that Jake in these talks, to either bring him back or not, can impact the Mets' decisions for the remainder of the offseason, in the sense where, let's say hypothetically, Jake really drags us out and the Mets are going after it the whole time? Say, worst scenario, they do not bring him back. And by then, Carlos Rodon, Tyler Anderson, Jameson Tyone, and all the other, medium to large fish are off the market by then. You risk that, to the degree where you saw with the Mets a couple years ago with James McCann, because they were fed up with the Rio Muto sweepstakes and how long they were taking. So they said, you know what, enough of this. We're going to go with a plan B. How do you envision the Mets go about this process?
If Cohen's being honest when he says he doesn't care how much he spends, then no, it won't affect it.
Okay.
Point blank, right? Like, I mean, if he doesn't care how much he's spending, then he won't. Then he'll have $45 million or $50 million earmarked for Jacob deGrom, and he'll say, "I don't care. I'll pay Aaron Judge. I'll pay whoever." Like that. To me, that's, if you're going to say those things, then go do it. Like, is what it is. I think it will affect. I think, like I said, although Cohen said those things, he's still a businessman. And realistically, if Jake's dragging his feet on a decision, who knows? And he has every right to do that. I'll be honest, as a fellow player, I hated when guys did that because it affects the entire market. It doesn't just affect the teams; it affects.
Yeah, it's all about the market.
Free agents.
Exactly. Yeah.
But realistically, look, it would be up to him. He could do whatever he wants, and yeah, I think it would absolutely affect kind of where the Mets end up, because there should be key guys that they have picked out in the beginning of free agency. But we've seen it play out. 2 years ago, they ended up with Taijuan Walker begrudgingly. And I was so happy for him and the Mets because I loved it. Obviously, it worked out mostly good. There was obviously a half last year where it wasn't good. But for the most part, Taijuan Walker was awesome. And the Mets didn't want him. He wasn't even a guy they talked about for 4 months in the offseason. They just ended up with him. So it's going to affect their decisions. And I mean, again, that's why the offseason's fun. It's going to be crazy to watch.
All right. One last thing I got for you guys, because we're going to have to cut things off soon. Joe's computer's dying, same way his audio has been dead this entire show.
Blame my tech for everything, not the fact that we said this was going to be a 45-minute episode.
Yeah, exactly.
Rex got garbage to take out, guys. Come on.
We look at the Braves and how great they are in extending young talent. Now, in my opinion, I think it's time for the New York Mets to start doing the same with Pete Alonso and Jeff McNeil. What's your guys' takes on that? Oh, Rex shaking his head.
So Rex and I
no, it's a different. No. I'm not saying not to extend them, but it's a different scenario. These guys have already earned like a lot of money, and they're not. They don't have the talent level of some of these Ronald Acuna Jr. Like, Pete's not Ronald Acuna Jr. Yes, he's great. Yes, he hits home runs. But he's not going to steal you 50 bags. He doesn't have the potential to play great defense. He doesn't have the best outfield arm in baseball. I'm not done yet. Okay. What?
I'm sorry. I thought you were saying this as a point as to not to extend them early then.
No, I'm saying it's a different scenario. So talking about who are you talking about them extending? Maybe Alvarez, if that's your guy. I'd like to see him play more than basically a playoff series. Yeah. So they haven't given they don't have that kind of youthful talent on their team right now. These other guys have pushed past that point where extending them on a long-term deal makes a ton of sense because they have gotten already to an age where they're 27, 28. I'm throwing these numbers off the top of my head.
McNeil's like what, 30?
What's that?
Is McNeil 30 now or close to? I know he's up there.
Maybe he is. I thought he was a little younger. But anyway, they've gotten to a point now where it doesn't make sense to have those long-term contracts because on the back end, you're going to get crushed. It's not extending them at 22, 23 for a long time. And so, I guess what I'm saying is it's theoretically, yes, they should start doing that, but they don't have anybody right now that they should start doing with yet. Alvarez being maybe the exception if they really feel like he's going to take that step and be the big league guy, which I would want to see at least. I know he was great in the minor leagues. I do Bleav he's going to be a great big leaguer, but I'd at least want to see it come to something. I mean, even if it's just if he comes out and plays game 1 next year and for a month he rakes, I would say, yeah, go for it. Go for it. And like the risk is worth the reward. What's that?
I said, get me to the All-Star break, right?
That's fine. That's fine too.
Like, at least
I'm trying to get it as cheap as possible, so the earlier the better. But you're right. That's okay.
I feel like I disagree when it comes to Alonzo McNeil. McNeil, no, because you still have like 2 more years of arbitration on him, and he's already 30. So with McNeil, I'd let that ride. But I feel like Alonzo at 27, Rec, would you give him 8 years for 240?
For a guy who's going to hit homers and be a DH?
Guy's going to drive in 130 runs.
I don't think you have to give him that much, is all I'm saying.
Do you think Pete would
what would his comp be?
less?
What's his comp?
270, 40, 130. I mean, I know he had slightly better numbers and he had 20 more home runs, but I think him and Judge are not that far off. Judge plays a little better defense.
Judge with the age is different, but no, there's
Isn't
no
Judge
comp there.
Already 30?
Yeah,
but there's no comp there because defensively they're in 2 different ballparks. Haha.
Jose Abreu, not what his current age, but
no, Jose Abreu never had Pete's power.
To me, I would not give Pete 8 years, $240 million. I love Pete, and I want him to stay a Met, and I want him to get whatever he's worth. I don't think he's worth that on the market. I really don't.
What did Matt Olson get?
Matt Olson, that's a great question actually, because they
8 years
far off with their production.
8 years, 180. If I'm just throwing that off the top of my head. Like,
it was more than Freeman.
I think Pete's better than Olson.
Right now, I agree.
Olson is a Gold Glove first baseman. I'm not saying Pete's not better offensively, but Olson is a fantastic defensive first baseman. I realize that we all fall in love with the offensive statistics in baseball, and that's great. I get it, but there's more than one side to the game, and that's why all these new analytical numbers I love, because they have given those guys more value. Mm-hmm. And when you don't have, you basically have a DH, because he's not going to play first for very long. He's going to get moved off of there pretty quickly. His athleticism is limited. He's tried to become as athletic as possible, as good of a first baseman as he possibly can, and he's okay. Like, he's serviceable at best. Move him to DH, get someone who can actually play first base. Because as time wears on, Francisco Lindor is not going to be able to be the same shortstop year after year after year. You still have to find a third baseman realistically. McNeil can continue to play second for at least 2 more years, maybe longer, depending on what they do. I don't know. But he's getting older. You can't have deficiencies at positions like this. So he's going to be a DH. I mean, I don't see that kind of money being thrown around, and those kind of years. I just don't. It doesn't make enough sense to me. I would rather go 5 years. I mean, what does he got? What does he have left? He was up in 19. Was his first year, right? So he's got 2 more years.
Yeah, he's free agent in 2025.
Yeah.
So same as McNeil, pretty sure.
If I'm going to extend him, you're saying 8 years from now, Joe, was what you were saying?
Through age 30.
I would give him 6 max. 6 would be the max I would go. And again, the AAV is not going to be $30 million a year. It just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, maybe at 6 years you could get him. 6 years, maybe 180 could make more sense as an AAV, just because you're getting him until 33, and you can assume obviously that all those offensive numbers stay. But yeah, that's a lot to pay for a DH, man. That they don't pay DHs like that.
Yeah, Rick. Here's the thing, though. I get what you're saying from the overall talent that he has at first base, but I think if he's going to have a prolonged career in New York, which I expect, I don't see him moving away from being the starting first baseman anytime soon. I really don't.
Then you're keeping basically a liability there for no reason, and I don't understand that. I don't understand why you wouldn't attempt to get a more athletic first baseman, because realistically, who are your other DHs right now? Obviously Vogie, and Alvarez, I think he has. What's that?
Alvarez potentially.
If you're going to bring this kid up, you better be catching him, in my opinion. I mean, look, if he can't catch, I guess then he becomes a DH. But then you're doing the same thing that you've done for years, which is have multiple DHs on a team, and defensively you suffer, and because of that your performance suffers, and your team suffers.
I was going to hold off on this for a later episode. We could deep dive it more later episode, but right now the guy I'm looking at is Josh Bell. I think as much as we love Vogelback, and I really do love him, I think he might be a guy to move on from. Sign Josh Bell to be your DH and only have a DH.
Who's a better defensive first baseman, Josh Bell or Pete Alonso?
Alonso.
That's tough.
Alonso.
I don't know if I can answer that question that quickly.
No, Alonso.
I can't answer it that quickly.
Yeah, I'd have to look at some numbers.
If I'm a betting man, I would say it's Alonso.
I think Josh Bell, switch hitter, guy who can hit consistently over 162 games, probably.
Yeah, if he doesn't fall off the cliff after being traded, like what he was with San Diego.
So did Juan Soto. No one really did well in the regular season after the trade, and look at him now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Bell, he took care of us in the wild card series. I think you got to have one DH.
I'm not saying I don't love Alonso and I don't love Alonso being in New York. I'm not going to commit that many years and that much money to a DH. That's all I'm saying. So realistically, I love Pete. I love Pete in New York. I think he has the right attitude. I think he's a great leader. I would love for him to stick around, but I'm just not going to go big extension, big money yet. It just doesn't make sense. They don't need to. And I think there'll always be mutual interest to keep him around. And he's never going to cost a ton because he is a DH. He's not a first baseman. That's just my opinion.
And I totally respect that.
The way baseball contracts work, it's all about finding specific comps. So you have to find that specific comp, one or two of them, and then that's where you get your numbers from. That's just the way it works. Right now, it's a terrible system. It's ridiculous, to be honest with you. But that's the way the system works, and that's how they pay guys. I thought when they paid Lindor his contract, I thought that was an overpay. And look, he proved to be fantastic this year, which, I mean, look, he was very good last year too. But he proved to be fantastic this year. But realistically, I mean, I don't know. When I look at the figures that some of these guys at the top end are making, and then what you're seeing guys like even Austin Riley, like he signed a big deal, but was it 11 years for?
Yeah, it was a great deal. Another bargain deal.
Pretty team
so
friendly.
That's what I'm saying. Like, would you realistically, do you think that Pete is worth more AAV than Austin Riley? I don't even think that's close, guys. I think Austin Riley, with the defense he plays at third base and his age, like I don't even think it's not even close. I realize Pete might be a better offensive player right now, but in 5 years, 6 years, Austin Riley's going to be the better offensive player. And defensively, what he does he's a very good defensive third baseman. Like, I'm sorry,
and that's why I think there's an issue if you allow Pete to hit the open market versus signing him before that. It doesn't need to be the craziest extension in the world, but again, you have to give to get in that sense. If you allow Alonso to go remainder of his contract, another 2-3 years, whatever it is, and he's
no one's going to pay him more than $30 million. No one is, because that's not how the game works. That's why I think it's with him. It's just not. You don't need to do that. I would be having those discussions with my young guys that I'm bringing up that show that they can make an impact, and I would do it early, just like you're saying that the Braves did. Other teams have done it too. That's where I would be looking, and I wouldn't go into my guys that I've had for 3-4 years that are getting closer to free agency anyway. It's especially guys like that are limited in some respects.
Okay. One final tidbit I want to share, and then we'll wrap things up. To Joe's point, if you want to get Josh Bell, which I'm not opposed to, in addressing the DH, talking there hypothetically for a second, then Daniel Vogelback isn't a Met next year, because the Mets have the ability to get out of that contract with him should they wish. If you look at the contract on the surface, they have him for another multiple years, but they can, I'm pretty sure, buy out or something about the option. I don't know the exact stats, but I know it's there, and eat, a couple mil, and then have him walk, and then you can bring in Josh Bell should you wish. So just something to think about. But guys, that's going to do it for episode 29 of Bleav in Queens. This one was all over the place. You're going to expect a lot more episodes just like this, these type of all over the place live shows throughout the offseason. We thank you so much for watching, listening, wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to subscribe here on YouTube at WardyNYM. Hit that like and subscribe. It means a lot. Make sure to follow us on all platforms where you get your podcasts as well. That's from Anthony Recker at Anthony_Recker. Check him out on all social medias, MLB Network. And also make sure to check out Joe with the Sorrell Sports Talk at Joe Sorrell on Twitter or wherever you get your social media. Guys, thank you so much for watching and listening again, and we'll talk to you guys all again in probably a week or so. Have a great one, folks.